Divorce was supposed to be their final chapter. For 8 long months, Ben tried to live without her, though her memory haunted every corner of his life. Then, in a fleeting moment on the street, everything shattered. Augusta, standing there with a baby bump that nearly knocked the breath from his lungs. The woman he had loved and lost was carrying a child. Could it be his child? Was it already too late to make things right? He stood confused, wondering if he should run after her or just wait and give her a call later in the evening. He had no idea where their story would lead next. The echo of the judge's gavel felt like a crack through Augusta's heart. The courtroom was nearly empty, but to her it might as well have been filled with thousands watching the end of her world. She sat frozen for a moment, staring at the papers in front of her. Divorce, a word she never imagined would apply to her marriage with Ben, the man who had once been her best friend, her confidant, her love. Across the table, Ben didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on the polished wood, his jaw clenched as if he had to hold back everything he might have wanted to say. Augusta could feel it. He hadn't stopped loving her. She knew him too well to mistake the look in his eyes when he finally glanced her way. The love was there, buried beneath something else: fear, pressure, pride. It hadn't been lack of love that tore them apart. It had been Ben's family's endless criticisms about her background, her not being enough, about how marriage to her could slow down his path to the empire he was building. And Ben, caught between defending her and proving himself to everyone, eventually gave in to the pressure. When he had asked for the divorce, he hadn't raised his voice, hadn't even looked angry. He had simply said, "I can't do this anymore, Augusta. Not like this." And she, exhausted from fighting for a place in his life where she always felt unwanted by those around him, hadn't begged him. The judge's voice droned on, confirming the legalities, but Augusta felt her spirit detach. She picked up her handbag with trembling hands and rose to leave. As she passed him, she caught the faintest flicker of sorrow in his eyes, but she kept walking. If he couldn't fight for her, she wouldn't beg him to. Outside, the city moved with its usual indifference. Cars zipped by, pedestrians chattered, and Augusta felt like a ghost among them. She pressed her coat tighter around her, not against the cold, but against the hollow ache expanding inside her chest. That night, in her small rented apartment, the reality of her new life sank in. She was alone. The bed that once smelled of him was gone. The home they had shared was gone. Even the hope of reconciliation was gone. She curled up on the couch, fighting tears until exhaustion claimed her. Days blurred into weeks. She worked, kept her head down, and avoided any place where she might hear his name. Then one morning, as she stood in her bathroom staring at the little stick in her trembling hands, her whole world tilted. Pregnant. She kneeled to the floor. Memories of Ben's smile, his laughter, his touch came rushing back. For a heartbeat, she almost reached for her phone. She almost dialed his number to tell him that despite the divorce, a piece of him still lived inside her. But then pride, wounded and stubborn, wrapped around her heart. Why should she? He had walked away. He had chosen his image, his family's approval, his ambitions over her. She whispered to herself, "No, Augusta, you don't need him. This child will have you. That's enough." From then on, she carried her secret silently. Every hospital visit was done alone. Every ultrasound picture tucked quietly into a folder hidden away. She didn't cry in public, but in the stillness of the night, when she pressed a hand against her growing belly, the tears would fall. She promised her unborn child love strong enough to make up for what was missing. As for Ben, he buried himself in work, convincing himself he had done the right thing. He tried to believe that Augusta would move on, that she deserved someone less burdened by expectations. But in the quiet moments, he couldn't stop thinking of her. He still loved her, perhaps more than he ever had, but he had chosen to let her go. What neither of them knew was that fate had its own timing. Months later, when paths crossed unexpectedly, Ben's world would stop at the sight of Augusta, her hands resting on the curve of her belly, carrying the child he never knew existed. But for now, their silence held.
Augusta quickly learned that silence had a weight of its own. In the weeks after the divorce, the quietness of her apartment pressed down on her like an invisible blanket. There was no faint hum of Ben's late-night calls in the study, no soft clatter of his keys at the door, no arguments that ended with the awkward truce of shared meals. It was just her, and now the life she carried. The discovery of her pregnancy had left her reeling. She spent days in disbelief, staring at the ultrasound photo the doctor had given her, the tiny heartbeat on the monitor echoing in her memory. "You're not alone," the doctor had said, with a smile. But Augusta had never felt lonelier. She told no one, not even her closest friends. The world believed her marriage to Ben had ended because they were simply incompatible, and she let them believe that. She refused to be the woman pitied for being pregnant after a failed marriage. Pride stiffened her back each morning as she went to work, even on days when the nausea stole her appetite and fatigue dragged her down. At her checkups, she sat alone among couples who whispered excitedly, pointing at their own ultrasound prints. Sometimes she caught herself envying them, not for their babies, but for the simple fact that they had someone holding their hand through it all. Meanwhile, across the city, Ben's life looked polished on the outside, but hollow within. He attended business meetings, shook hands with investors, and smiled at the right moments, but his heart wasn't in any of it. Nights were the worst. He would sit in his penthouse apartment, staring at the skyline, glass in hand, wondering if Augusta was okay. He told himself he had done what was best. His parents had breathed relief when they heard the divorce was finalized, reminding him of all the ways Augusta wasn't suitable. And yet, every memory of her haunted him. Her laugh, the way she wrinkled her nose when concentrating, the warmth she carried into every room. Still, he stayed silent. Pride and fear shackled him. He had loved her too much to watch her constantly be scrutinized, and too much to see her crushed by the weight of expectations tied to his name. Letting her go had felt like protecting her, though he hadn't dared say it aloud. But protecting her left him empty. Augusta, on the other hand, began to adjust in her own quiet way. She started knitting tiny clothes in the evenings, more to calm her racing thoughts than out of skill. She whispered to her baby at night, promising love and stability, even when her own heart wavered. At work, her colleagues noticed the subtle changes, how her glow seemed different, how she excused herself more often. Some speculated, but no one asked directly. Augusta carried herself with dignity, making it clear that her private life was not for discussion. One evening, after a long hospital visit, she sat by her window, cradling the latest sonogram photo. Her baby's form was clearer now, a little nose, the beginning of tiny arms. Tears welled in her eyes. "You'll never lack love," she whispered, pressing the picture to her chest. "Even if it's just me." And across town, Ben sat at his desk, staring at a blank page he had tried to turn into a letter. He wanted to write to her, to tell her he regretted everything, to confess that he missed her beyond words. But each time the words reached his lips, he tore the paper and poured another drink. Two hearts, separated by pride and silence, both aching, both lost in the shadows of what had been. Neither knowing that time, as cruel as it was slowly guiding them toward a collision that would change everything.
It had been 8 long months since Augusta walked out of that courtroom, leaving Ben with nothing but silence and regrets. He had buried himself in his business empire, building, expanding, achieving, yet every success rang hollow. Nights were worse. He often found himself staring at the empty side of his bed, wondering why letting her go felt less like freedom and more like slow suffocation. On a crisp afternoon, Ben left his office earlier than usual. The city streets buzzed with life, horns blaring, vendors shouting, people weaving in and out of traffic. He wasn't looking for her. He had trained himself not to, but fate rarely asked permission. Across the street, just beyond the row of storefronts, he saw a familiar figure. At first, his breath caught simply at the sight of her. Augusta, her hair tied back, her step graceful yet slower than he remembered. She wore a flowing dress, and though the crowd moved around her, she seemed to glow against the noise of the city. Then he saw it. Her belly. Round, unmistakable. Ben stopped dead in his tracks, the world tilting beneath him. His chest tightened, and the air fled his lungs. Pregnant. She was pregnant. Her mind raced in 1,000 directions at once. 8 months. The timing hit him like a blow. This wasn't someone else's child. This was his. Their child. And she had carried it all this time without telling him. Ben stepped off the curb, nearly missing a passing cab. "Augusta!" he called out, his voice raw, louder than he intended. Heads turned, but she froze where she was, shoulders stiffening at the sound of his voice. Slowly she turned, and when her eyes met his, the noise of the city seemed to dissolve around them. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. She clutched her handbag closer and instinctively placed her other hand on her belly. Ben reached her in a few strides, his eyes locked on her stomach, then her face. You're pregnant?" His voice cracked on the word. Augusta's chin lifted, her eyes sharp, though her heart thundered inside her chest. "Yes, I am." "And you didn't think to tell me?" The question slipped out, a mix of hurt and disbelief. She let out a shaky laugh, bitter at the edges. "Tell you? Ben, you chose to walk away. You signed the papers. You made it clear you didn't want this marriage. Why should I chase you down with news you never asked for?" Her words cut deeper than any blade. He staggered back slightly, his guilt colliding with the ache in his chest. He wanted to explain, to tell her that the divorce hadn't been about her, that it had been about the pressure crushing him, the fear of ruining her life by keeping her tied to a family who never accepted her. But what good were excuses now? Ben's eyes softened as they fell to her belly again. That's my child." Her grip on her bag tightened. "Our child," she corrected, her voice trembling but firm. "And don't worry, I never planned to ask for your help. We're fine on our own." He swallowed hard, torn between pride and the overwhelming desire to reach for her. "Augusta, I didn't know." "Exactly, Ben. You didn't know because you never stayed to find out." And with that, she turned to walk away, her steps slower but resolute. Ben stood frozen, watching the woman he loved, his wife in all but name, walk away once more, carrying not just her broken heart, but his child too. His hands trembled as regret swelled inside him like a wave threatening to drown him. For the first time in 8 months, Ben realized the true cost of the choice he had made. And as Augusta disappeared into the crowd, one thought echoed in his mind with brutal clarity. I can't lose them both.
Ben didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse, his thoughts trapped on the image of Augusta's rounded belly, the protective way she held it, the sharpness in her eyes when she told him, "We're fine on our own." He replayed every moment of their marriage, the laughter, the arguments, the night he told her he wanted a divorce. He remembered the silence that followed, the way her face broke in quiet hurt before she masked it with pride. He had thought he was sparing her from the crushing disapproval of his family, from being dragged down by expectations she had never deserved. But now, looking back, he saw the truth. He hadn't spared her at all. He had abandoned her. By morning, he couldn't stand it any longer. He had to see her. Augusta answered the door with wary eyes. She looked tired, yet beautiful in the quiet way she always had been. A loose sweater draped over her growing stomach, and for a moment, Ben forgot how to breathe. "What are you doing here, Ben?" she asked softly, her hand still resting on the doorframe, ready to close it again. I had to see you," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "I couldn't stop thinking about yesterday." Her lips tightened. "You saw what you saw. That's all there is to it." "No, Augusta," he said quickly, stepping closer, desperate. "It's not just what I saw, it's what I didn't know. All these months you've been carrying my child, alone. Why didn't you tell me?" Her laugh came out brittle, heavy with pain. "Because, Ben, you made your choice. You walked out on me. Do you really think I wanted to hand you a reason to feel guilty? Or worse, to have you treat me like an obligation? I couldn't bear it." The words stung, but he couldn't deny the truth in them. He lowered his head, ashamed. "I never stopped loving you," he confessed quietly. Augusta's eyes flickered, but she didn't soften. "Then why did you leave, Ben? Why did you sign those papers if love was still there?" He exhaled shakily. "Because I was a coward. I let my family's opinions, the weight of my career, and my own fears drown out everything else. I thought I was protecting you from their judgment, from a life where you'd always be told you weren't enough. I thought letting you go would give you freedom." Her eyes brimmed with tears now, though her voice was steady. "Freedom? Then do you know what freedom felt like for me? Waking up every morning alone, hearing the doctor say my baby's heartbeat was strong, and realizing you weren't there to hear it. Freedom was carrying our child through nausea and exhaustion without a hand to hold. Freedom was crying at night because the man I loved chose pride over me." Her words broke him. He reached out instinctively, but she stepped back, shaking her head. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," she whispered. "You left me when I needed you most. That doesn't just go away." Ben's chest ached with the weight of her truth. He nodded slowly, his voice trembling. "I know, and I don't expect forgiveness overnight. But Augusta, please, let me at least be here now, for you, for our baby." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Her hand rested gently over her stomach, as though weighing the decision not just for herself, but for the child growing within her. Finally, she said, her voice quieter, "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Ben. But this child deserves love, even if I can't forget what you did." Ben's eyes filled with tears he didn't bother hiding.
Then let me prove it. One step at a time. I'll be here, however you'll allow me." She didn't answer, but she also didn't close the door. And in that fragile pause, something stirred. Small, fragile, but alive. Not forgiveness yet, but the first hint of a bridge between broken hearts.
Ben had never been the type of man to linger at the edges of someone's life. In business, he was decisive, bold, unwilling to be ignored. But with Augusta, everything was different. He had broken her trust once. Barging back in would only push her further away. So he chose another path: quiet persistence. It began with a small gift left at her doorstep, a soft yellow blanket folded neatly with a handwritten note that simply read, "I'm sorry for everything." Augusta found it when she came home from her doctor's appointment. Her first instinct was to return it, to shut out the reminder of Ben's presence. But as she held the blanket against her cheek, her resolve wavered. It was warm, soft, thoughtful. She tucked it away in the nursery she had slowly been preparing, though she told herself it meant nothing. The next week, another package arrived, a tiny pair of knitted booties, accompanied by a card. "I don't deserve a second chance, but I hope someday our child will know I tried." Augusta's chest tightened as she read the words. She wanted to stay angry. She wanted to remind herself of the long nights she had cried alone. But with every gift, every note written in Ben's familiar handwriting, she felt the ice around her heart begin to crack. Ben never rang the bell, never demanded to be let in. He left his offerings quietly, respecting her distance. Yet she always knew it was him. At work, she caught herself glancing at her phone, half expecting a message from him. When her colleagues mentioned seeing a well-dressed man standing by her street, she pretended not to care, though her heart skipped a beat, knowing it had to be Ben. Meanwhile, Ben's own life had shifted. Board meetings and contracts felt meaningless compared to the thought of Augusta walking alone to the hospital or folding baby clothes in silence. He found himself scouring baby shops late at night, unsure what was practical, only knowing he wanted to be part of it somehow. He bought rattles, stuffed animals, even a rocking chair, though he never delivered that one. Instead, he left small, manageable gifts, as if testing the waters of her forgiveness. Each card carried words he had once been too proud to say. "I miss you. I still love you. I wish I could undo the past." One evening, Augusta opened her door to find a neatly wrapped box. Inside was a silver frame, empty, but waiting for a photo. The card said, "For the first picture of our baby, I hope someday I'll be worthy to be in it too." Tears slipped down her cheeks as she sat on the couch, the frame clutched to her chest. She wanted to hate him for making her feel again, for stirring hope she had tried so hard to bury. But the truth is, Ben was no longer the man who had walked away. The Ben who left gifts at her door, who apologized without demanding anything in return, was different, humble, human. That night, as she placed the frame on her bedside table, Augusta whispered to her unborn child, "Your father is trying." Across the city, Ben sat in his car outside her apartment, watching the faint glow of her window. He didn't go up. He didn't need to. Just knowing she had accepted the frame, that she hadn't left it outside or returned it, was enough to keep him going. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could win back not only the right to be a father, but also the chance to be her husband again.
The nursery smelled faintly of new wood and fresh paint. Augusta had spent weeks preparing it, folding tiny clothes into drawers, smoothing blankets over the crib, and lining stuffed animals on the shelves. It was her way of coping, of proving to herself that she could do this alone. But lately, the room no longer felt like her solitary refuge. Every gift Ben left behind had found its way here. The blanket draped over the rocking chair, the booties tucked into a drawer and the silver frame resting on the dresser. One Saturday afternoon, as Augusta placed folded onesies into the dresser, there was a soft knock at her door. Not the quick rap of a delivery man, but a hesitant, measured knock. She froze, her heart thudding. She knew it was him. She opened the door a crack. Ben stood there, not in his tailored suits, but in a simple sweater and jeans, holding a bag that looked awkward in his hands. His eyes softened when he saw her. "Hi," he said quietly. Augusta hesitated before answering. "You shouldn't keep coming here, Ben." "I know," he admitted, his voice steady but humble. "I didn't know if you already had these, but I thought maybe they'd help." For a moment, she wanted to shut the door, to remind him that his concern was too late. But something in his eyes stopped her. The unguarded sincerity, the way he seemed almost nervous, like a man trying to prove he could be better. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice soft. She opened the door wider. "Do you want to come in for a minute?" Ben's relief was almost palpable. He stepped inside cautiously, his gaze sweeping over the apartment until it landed on the nursery door left ajar. Augusta caught the flicker of longing in his expression, and for the first time she didn't feel angry. He followed her into the nursery, standing quietly as his eyes took in the small space. "It's beautiful," he murmured. His gaze lingered on the crib, then on the baby clothes. His throat tightened. "I should have been here helping you set this up." Augusta's hands rested protectively over her belly. "You weren't," she said simply, but there was no venom in her tone, only truth. He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know, and I'll regret it every day. But if you let me, Augusta, I want to be here now, however you'll allow me." She looked at him for a long time. There were still scars between them, wounds not healed. But for the first time, she saw not the man who had walked away, but the man trying desperately to walk back. After a pause, she said, "You can come with me to my next appointment, if you want." Ben's breath caught. "Really?" She nodded, her lips pressing together. "Just don't make promises you can't keep. I won't let you disappoint this child the way you disappointed me." His chest ached at her words, but he nodded. "I won't. I swear, Augusta, I'll be there." When the day of the appointment came, Ben sat beside her in the waiting room, nervous but grateful. And when the doctor guided the ultrasound wand across her belly, filling the room with the rhythmic sound of their baby's heartbeat, Ben's eyes filled with tears. He reached instinctively for Augusta's hand. She stiffened at first, then slowly let him hold it. In that moment, something shifted. Not forgiveness yet, but the beginning of trust. A fragile bridge stretched between them, one heartbeat at a time. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Augusta had expected. Ben kept his word. He showed up to every doctor's appointment, carried groceries to her apartment, and even fixed the creaky cabinet door she had been ignoring for months. It wasn't about grand gestures anymore. It was the little things. How he'd quietly brew her tea when nausea struck, or how he sat through long evenings reading baby books aloud, stumbling over the funny sections just to make her laugh. But beneath the surface, Augusta's heart still battled with itself. Love and resentment tangled inside her. She saw the man who had broken her, and she saw the man who was trying to heal her. The question was, could she truly let go of the past? One rainy evening, Ben arrived at her door drenched, holding a stuffed elephant wrapped in a clear bag. His hair clung to his forehead, his coat soaked through,
but his eyes carried that same determination she had come to recognize. He said, "I need to talk to you," his voice trembling for more than the cold. Augusta let him in, though her arms folded across her chest. He set the toy on the table and turned to her, his expression raw. "I've spent weeks trying to show you I've changed, but I need to say it out loud." His hands clenched at his sides. "I divorced you not because I stopped loving you, but because I thought I wasn't enough. I let my insecurities, my obsession with success, and my fear of being a failure as a husband cloud my judgment. I thought you deserved better, and in pushing you away, I became the worst version of myself." His words sliced through her, pulling at wounds she thought had scarred over. She turned away, staring at the window streaked with rain. "Do you have any idea what it felt like, Ben? To watch you walk out when I needed you the most? To find out I was carrying your child alone and know you'd already decided we weren't worth fighting for?" Her voice cracked and tears stung her eyes. Ben stepped closer, but didn't touch her. "I know, Augusta, and I will never forgive myself for that. But I'm begging you, please don't let my worst mistake define the rest of our lives. Let me be here, not just for the baby, but for you. Let me prove that I can stay this time." The silence between them was heavy. Augusta's hands trembled against her sides, torn between anger and longing. She remembered their laughter before things fell apart, the way he used to hold her as though he was his whole world. But she also remembered the nights of loneliness, the emptiness of her bed, and the tears she had swallowed in the dark. "You're asking me to trust you again," she whispered. "I'm asking you to let me earn it," he replied softly. Her chest ached, her heart pulling in two directions. Forgiveness wasn't simple. It wasn't a switch she could flip. But as she looked at him standing there, soaked and desperate, she saw not just the man who left, but the man who had returned and refused to let go. Finally, she exhaled shakily. "I don't know if I can ever forget, Ben, but maybe I can try to forgive." Relief washed over his face, but he didn't celebrate. Instead, he nodded humbly. "That's all I ask, a chance." That night, as Augusta lay in bed, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, she realized that something inside her had shifted. She hadn't given him her heart again, not yet, but she had opened the door. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step to healing.
The delivery room was filled with the raw sounds of new life. Augusta's cries of pain, the nurse's hurried instructions, and finally the piercing wail of a newborn. Exhausted and drenched in sweat, Augusta collapsed back against the pillows, her chest heaving. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the doctor laid a tiny, wriggling baby in her arms. Ben stood nearby, eyes shining with tears he didn't bother to hide. He had stayed by her side the whole time, gripping her hand when the contractions grew unbearable, whispering encouragement when she thought she couldn't push anymore. And now, as he looked at the fragile little being they had brought into the world, something inside him cracked wide open. "She's beautiful," he whispered hoarsely, brushing a trembling finger over the baby's cheek. Augusta didn't answer, but the faintest smile touched her lips. For a moment, there was peace. Just the three of them, wrapped in a cocoon of new beginnings. Yet peace didn't erase the past. After she was discharged, Augusta returned home with the baby. Ben visited every day, sometimes bringing diapers and formula, other times simply sitting quietly while she napped, rocking the baby in his arms. He never pushed, never demanded more than she could give. He showed up, day after day. His persistence as steady as the sunrise. 3 months passed. The baby grew stronger, her laughter filling Augusta's small apartment. And still, Ben came, carrying gifts, but more importantly, carrying presents. He changed diapers, burped her after feedings, and stayed through long, fussy nights so Augusta could rest. One chilly evening, Augusta stood at the window, watching Ben, as he paced the living room, their daughter cradled against his chest. He hummed softly, rocking her with a tenderness that made Augusta's heart ache. This was the man she had once loved, the man who had broken her, yet the same man who had been faithfully stitching her trust back together, piece by piece. She realized then that he hadn't missed a single day in 3 months. He had kept every word he had spoken, proving with actions what promises alone could not. When he returned the baby to her arms, Augusta looked up at him, her throat tight. "Ben," he froze, searching her face. "You've been here every single day, even when I pushed you away, even when I thought I couldn't forgive." Her eyes glistened. "And I can't deny it anymore. I see who you are now. I see how much you love her, how much you still love me." Hope flickered in his eyes, cautious and desperate. "Augusta, are you saying—" She nodded, tears spilling freely. "It's time we go home. Not just me and her, us, as a family." For a long heartbeat, silence filled the room. Then Ben pulled her and the baby into his arms, his chest shaking with quiet sobs. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "I swear I'll never let either of you go again." 2 days later, Augusta packed her bags. Standing in the doorway of her apartment, she glanced back one last time, then stepped into the waiting car. Their daughter slept peacefully in her carrier, Ben's hand steady on Augusta's as they drove away. When they arrived at his house, the home she once thought she'd never see again, Augusta felt an unexpected calm settle over her. The walls no longer seemed cold, they seemed ready to hold laughter again. As they carried the baby inside, Ben turned to her, his voice low and reverent. "Welcome home, Augusta." And for the first time in a long while, she believed it. This was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of a new one, written in forgiveness, persistence, and love strong enough to survive even the deepest wounds.
Life after reconciliation was not without its storms. 3 months had turned into 6, and in that time, Ben's persistence had blossomed into steady devotion. He was present for midnight feedings, morning giggles, and the quiet afternoons when Augusta simply needed another pair of hands. Yet outside their home, not everyone celebrated their reunion. Ben's family, especially his mother, disapproved. They whispered that Augusta had trapped him with the baby, that reconciliation was weakness. One evening, when his sister hinted that he was throwing his future away, Ben's patience snapped. "Enough," he said firmly, his tone colder than ice. "You had your chance to comment on my choices before. Not anymore. Augusta and our daughter are my family now, and if you can't respect that, then you'll keep your distance." It was the first time Augusta had ever seen him stand so openly against them, and it softened something deep within her heart. For once, he wasn't trying to please anyone, only her, only their child. Weeks later, as they sat on the porch, watching their baby crawl clumsily across the blanket, Ben reached for her hand. His thumb brushed her knuckles nervously. "Augusta," he began, his voice steady but hopeful. "I know I've asked before, but I want to say it again. Will you marry me again? Will you give me the honor of being your husband, not just the father of our child?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with tenderness yet marked by quiet resolve. "Ben, what we have now is fragile but real. We're building trust, piece by piece. Marriage feels like rushing ahead, and I'm not ready for that step. Not yet." His chest tightened, disappointment flickering across his face, but he didn't argue. Instead, he nodded, slowly, squeezing her hand. "Then I'll wait, for as long as it takes." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "What matters is that we're together, that our daughter has both of us. We don't need a ring or vows right now. We just need love, and we have plenty of that." The baby squealed in delight as if echoing her words. Ben leaned closer, pressing a gentle kiss to Augusta's temple, his eyes closing as if to seal the moment in memory. For the first time in years, Augusta felt whole, not because everything was perfect, but because they had chosen each other again, despite scars, despite doubts, despite the voices outside their door. Love had not come back to them as a grand, sweeping gesture. It had returned quietly, persistently, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. And as they sat together, watching their daughter's laughter dance through the air, they knew this was enough. Not the end of their story, just the beginning, written slowly, in patience and in love.
What are your thoughts about this story? Do you believe in giving someone a second chance? Let us know in the comment section below. Also, subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories. Thank you.